pleased to be able to introduce someone who has personally been of a huge benefit to me when it became clear to me that I needed, even as an employee at BYU, to be out at church, to be out at work, to be just out. And that was necessary for good mental health, which it proved to actually do. Travis Steward is a former mission president to the Texas Houston Mission and has spent most of his career at the Provo Missionary Training Center working for the missionary department and Brigham Young University. As a gay member of the church, he and his wife Margaret have raised 6 awesome humans and now enjoy loving and supporting their 8 amazing grandkids. Travis has facilitated a weekly gay men's support group for the past 10 years and participated on several podcasts, including Questions from the Closet, Listen, Learn, and Love, and Leading Saints. When he's not out working in his garden, which is a wonder, we could give a whole seminar on the half acre of glory that is the piece of Eden that he's created there. Checking off travel destinations on his bucket list or giving sugar to his grandchildren, you will find him up at his sweet little cabin tidying up the forest. Please meet a friend and a mentor to me in an important part of my journey, Travis Steward.
You're all mic'd up? I don't. Thanks. Hi, everybody. Hi, friends. I'm so really honored to be with you today and share a few thoughts. Most families celebrate some rite of passage in their homes, mostly for kids growing up. For example, that first day of kindergarten, maybe it's baptisms, graduations, missions. In my family growing up, it was getting your hunter safety permit when you turned 12 years old. This meant that you could now buy a hunting license and you could carry a rifle and participate in the annual family deer and elk hunting trips. Some months before my 12th birthday, my mom began to talk about the local hunter safety course that would soon be offered in our small hometown. I was already well aware of the expectations that my family had that I should be thrilled to finally be able to carry a gun and kill my first buck. I was so full of dread as this approached, and I tried to think of a way to get out of this annual traumatic experience where a kid just has to do what he's told, or you'll be mocked endlessly for being a sissy or a girly boy. It had been difficult enough for me to be along on those outings and experience the fear and sadness for these animals, but now I was expected to kill one myself. To make a long story short, I managed to dodge the deadline for getting into the course over the next couple of years until my mom eventually gave up on prodding me to do so. I know that this created some confusion and disappointment for my mom and in my family, but as an emerging young adult, recognizing that I was drawn to the boys rather than the girls, my hunter safety course would be the first of many ways that I knew I would disappoint those who loved and cared for me. And I was terrified of disappointing them, so I pretended for them so that they would be all right. Back then, I didn't have the words. I didn't think I'm gay. I was bad. Like me, most of you probably have grown up with false expectations of who or how you're supposed to be that has caused fear and pain because you didn't want to disappoint others. My family, my friends, my teachers, they all had an idea of who I should be. And in all of those ideas, I knew that I wasn't supposed to be gay. And when you're a child and you sense you're disappointing people, even in some unspoken or undefined way, you don't have the tools to understand that it's not your job to be who they want you to be. As a kid, I absorbed shame like a sponge. I remember feeling this vague but heavy pressure to get it right without even knowing completely what it was I was supposed to be getting right. It felt like landmines everywhere, waiting to blow me to bits if I misstep or I got it wrong. Be a man, Toughen up. Man up. Don't be a sissy. Be a man about it. The truth is, when people are disappointed in someone for being queer, they are not reacting to that person's experience. They are reacting to their own projection of what that might mean if it were true for them. They also might feel betrayed, but not by you. They're betrayed by the idea of who they thought you were, or more specifically, who they hoped you would be. Expectations in relationships may be necessary and helpful, but misdirected disappointments start when the expectations from others don't match who we actually are or what we actually want for ourselves. For example, I'm not going to go to college. I'm getting a divorce. I'm a man and not a woman. I don't believe that anymore. The responsibility for disappointment rests with those who create expectations, not with the person with whom they project the expectation. It's unfair and unhealthy to project our expectations onto others. Expectations really are not facts. They are assumptions, hopes, and constructs that people build in their mind about what your life should look like. And when those expectations aren't met, when you don't behave the way someone thought you would or should, their disappointment is not your fault. It's a consequence of their own illusion. And instead of owning that disappointment as theirs, they often hand it to you silently and sometimes loudly. And then suddenly you're responsible for fixing feelings that you really never caused. I call it the double whammy. Not only do I silently suffer in shame and fear because of your homophobia, but I also have to comfort and reassure you in it. Projected expectations often come from a place of worry, fear, or control, which is actually the worst possible place that anything can come from. Almost 20 years ago, in fact, 20 years ago, Thursday, Margaret and I and our 6 kids arrived in the Texas Houston mission as new mission leaders. As soon as we arrived, I became aware of an elder who wanted to go home, and apparently had been wanting to go home for some time before I got there. I had just come from the seminar for new mission leaders, and it was still very, very fresh in my mind. A general authority's strong admonition that we would not lose any of our missionaries. Regardless of his intentions, I interpreted that to mean that I would be a good mission president if none of our 500 plus missionaries over the next 300 years would return home early under any circumstance. I met on multiple occasions with this elder immediately, often working daily to convince him to stay on the mission. I'm embarrassed to admit that I fell prey to the unrealistic expectation that I picked up and then turned around and projected on him. All I could think about was how I would be viewed to have lost a missionary and to have done it in the first week of my service. I was so worried about my own fear of failing that I was blind to the emotional turmoil and pain that he had been suffering for way too long. Fortunately for both of us, I came to my senses and was able to quickly return him home for professional help in his emotional distress and deep depression. I will continue to regret that lapse of judgment and selfishness all my days. But that experience taught me a very powerful lesson about the pain that can be inflicted when we project our fears onto others. Often it can feel like we're responsible for the pain others experience around their disappointments. It's kind of an emotional servitude, being tasked with keeping peace in a war that you didn't even start. Living under that kind of weight for too long does something to you. you start to preempt rejection by hiding. You become a manager of other people's comfort. We can't really be at peace with who we are as long as we try to manage the disappointment of others. I have a very dear person in my life that after much turmoil, I told about my same-sex attraction years ago. Rather than the support and encouragement that I hoped I would receive from them, I was met with disbelief and denial. The response was so shocking that I was sure that they just must have misunderstood. So I continued to explain more and more, only to be met with a complete and abrupt dismissal. As if I was just being dramatic or I was just confused. It has never been mentioned again between us or acknowledged these past several years. I have vacillated between wanting to mention or acknowledge, I vacillated between wishing I had never told them and wanting to make it better for them. I finally came to the conclusion that there was really nothing for me to do because there was really nothing that I had done. I was the exact same person 10 minutes after telling them as I was before I told them. The only thing that changed was them, and I couldn't, and more importantly, shouldn't touch that. It can be difficult to let others take responsibility for their disappointment when we've been conditioned to manage that for them. Those people might include parents, partners, friends, employers, and church leaders. For me, these are people with whom I felt the greatest amount of shame, possibly because it was from them I felt the greatest potential for disappointment, and with whom I had the most to lose. Your shame will tell you where you need to start letting go of managing others' emotions. As people pleasers, we're always ready to acquiesce what we feel is the greater need of others over our own. Suppressing our own needs, opinions, or preferences in order to avoid conflict or gain approval leads to a loss of identity and very low self-esteem. How can anyone be at peace with who they are when they are always preparing for someone's heartbreak over it? Something that I figured out for myself is that if I feel the need to explain, convince, or to comfort someone in their disappointment or discomfort of me not living up to their expectations because I'm gay, then it most likely means that I think they must have reason to be disappointed, which in turn just reinforces the idea that there is something wrong with me. I think I want to say that again. When I feel the need to explain, convince, or to comfort someone in their disappointment or discomfort of me not living up to their expectation because I'm gay, then it most likely means that I think that they must have reason to be disappointed, which in turn just reinforces the idea that there is something wrong with me. I can't be fine with who I am while at the same time trying to convince others that there's nothing wrong with me. We can learn to identify unrealistic expectations aimed at us so we can protect ourselves and allow others to be responsible for their own disappointed expectations. We can ask ourselves, where or whom is this expectation coming from? Is it a spoken one or unspoken or even imagined? Was I a part of deciding and determining this expectation? Is the expectation a projection of someone's worry or fear for me? Am I choosing to accept this expectation? In closing, I just want to say that it's not only all right, it's absolutely necessary to protect who you are and what you want for yourself. Don't pick up the false expectations that others lay down for you, and don't lay down false expectations for others. When can this be about you instead of about your people who might be worried or uncomfortable, which feels like disappointment. It has felt like my story of decades of shame and pain and hiding are always upstaged by controversy, as if no one wants to believe that they could have ever been a part of the reason for this type of suffering. Sometimes I want to scream, "My hell, people, I was going to kill myself, and you're worried about whether or not I'm still going to church?" I'm not a controversy. You're not a controversy. Let's just keep being the good, kind, peaceful, loving humans, and let's let those with their controversy of opinions and false expectations figure out their own fears and how to deal with their own self-inflicted disappointments. Thank you.